In those days, the crest was in service to Steward Captain Auxilia of the Drift. It has been 2 weeks since Iron Gull and his squad left aboard the drift ship Aleko. The captain asks for news, though he knows it will be another few weeks if all goes well. He's been meeting with Steward Captain Auxilia and a representative of the Shade. The captain has always kept his own counsel, but I see the exhaustion in his eyes. The political maneuvering weighs on him, on us all. Give us an enemy to fight, and we will defeat them. Life as a mercenary is often short and brutal. We sell our services to those who pay, and that stance often makes us enemies of every societal strata. There are those who call us mongrels, sellswords, gutter trash. And they are right. To serve with the crest is to eschew the niceties of society, to be looked down upon, to be hunted. A mercenary alone is a target, but the crest, together, is a force to be reckoned with. Soldiers of the crest die, but we endeavor to ensure they do not die alone. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, Benn tries to survive a brutal attack from behind. Find out what happens on episode 8, Backstabbed. Benn Winestone makes his way to the hold of the Aleko after parting with his sergeant Iron Gull, who is called away to speak with the steward of the Aleko. Benn is going into the hold to check on the Vidala cargo that they picked up and are transporting back to Heartvale. The soldiers of the crest who are aboard the Aleko are here in disguised as new recruits sailing aboard this drift ship. There shouldn't be anyone who knows who they are. There shouldn't be anyone aware of their presence on this ship. And yet, when Benn descends into the hold, he doesn't see or hear the figure lurking in the shadows waiting for him. As Benn approaches the crate and is looking at it with a wary eye, this imaginary camera pans around and we see a figure encased in shadow. We see them step forward and there's a flash of steel as a blade drives towards Benn's back. He feels it pierce through the fabric of his tunic and into his back. And we're going to find out how bad this is. To do that, we are going to engage in combat. So Benn feels this punch of metal from behind, and we are going to roll 2d6 and add our fierce, which is +1, to determine just how bad this attack is. So here we go. Oh no, it's 3 + 1 fierce is 4, which is a miss. So not only is it bad, it's real bad. Okay, so Benn, being unaware of this blow coming in, feels the metal of the dagger pierce his back, and he gasps a little bit as the blade enters his flesh, and he is going to take, I think, 3 harm from this, and I am going to have him roll the taking harm move. So when you suffer harm, roll plus harm suffered. So this is 3 harm, and I'm going to say he is wearing his armor, but I think it's 3 harm after the armor has absorbed 1. So I think it would have been 4 harm minus 1 for his armor. So he's going to take 3 harm, and we're going to roll our 2d6 and add plus 3. And for this, low rolls are what we want. So here we go. Let's find out. Uh-oh. That's 7 plus 3 is 10. So on a 10 plus, the MC can choose 1. You're out of the action for the time being, unconscious, downed, writhing in pain, or panicked. It's worse than it seemed. Take an additional 1 harm, or choose 2 from the 7 to 9 list below. I don't want Benn to be out of the action because I think that effectively means he'll be dead. So I'm going to say, let's look at our options from the 7 to 9 list. So you lose your footing, you lose your grip on whatever you're holding, you lose track of someone or something you're attending to, you miss noticing something important. Okay, I'm going to actually go for the it's worse than it seemed, take 1 additional harm. So that is going to take him to 4 harm. He just got done healing from those bruises, but this is a bad hit as he is now bleeding. I think it just missed a vital organ, but he is definitely not in a good position here. Now, let's go ahead and look at what harm does. So 4 harm means immense pain, broken bones, or internal bleeding, falling a great distance, getting stabbed with something and square in the gut, or having your skin scalded by boiling oil. Okay, so fictionally speaking here, he is extremely hurt, but I think he is also a soldier, so he is going to be able to shake this off a little bit. So he's going to be able to fight back in this situation. So Benn stumbles forward into the crates and turns around, drawing his short sword. He's breathing in short bursts, and his eyes are flicking to and fro in the hold as he is looking for the figure that attacked him. And what does he see? I'm going to go over to my random tables from Maze Rats, and I'm going to roll 2d6, and that is going to tell me something about their appearance. We've got 5 and 5, which is they're square-jawed. Let's get another physical detail here. 2 and 2 is burn scars, and they are dressed in dark clothes. Benn can see this square jaw jutting out from this hood, and the jaw and like lower face are marred by these intense burns, these scars. Benn, gasping for air, draws his blade, drops down into a low stance, and kind of holds out one hand ahead of him, holding the blade up and trying to maintain focus on this target as the target starts to move to the side as if getting ready to rush him again. Benn is facing off with this figure and is going to prepare to engage in combat once more. So we're going to go ahead and roll 2d6, add our fierce, and here we go. That's 6 plus 1 is a 7, which is going to be a mixed success. So on a hit, 7 to 9, choose one of the following. You attack with vigor, inflict +1 harm. You parry their blows, you take -1 harm. You battle aggressively, inflict +2 harm, but take an additional +1 harm to yourself. Or fight defensively. You inflict -1 harm, but take an additional -2 harm to yourself. I think I am going to take the fighting defensively option, because I think that's what Benn would do here in this case. So he is going to deal 1 harm to this enemy and is going to take no harm in response, as he is able to basically parry the enemy's blow and then punches him in the face with the pommel of his short sword, and the attacker stumbles back, snarls a little bit, and they begin circling once again. At this point, I'm going to do something else, which I'm going to spend 3 honor, which is all of my honor, because I think Benn is in a pretty bad spot here. So I'm going to spend all of my honor, and I'm going to use the honor move, Call on Your Faction. And when you call on your faction for help, support, or to advance your agenda, spend between 0 to 3 honor, and then roll plus honor spent. So since I'm spending 3, I'm going to roll 2d6 and add 3 to that. Hoping for a really good roll. Here we go. 5 and 3 is 8 on the dice, plus 3 is 11. So on a 10 plus, activate one of your faction's benefits. So going over and looking at our faction, it's the Crest, Mercenary Guild. Their status is Outcast, and their benefits are Magic and Dirty Work. Both of which would be super helpful in this case. So I'm actually going to roll a d6, and 1, 2, and 3 is going to be Magic. 4, 5, and 6 is going to be Dirty Work. I rolled a 6. All right, so Benn stumbles back. They've been circling. He's close to the hold entrance. And in a voice that maybe even surprises him, he calls out and says, "Crest, fellows of the Crest, come to me. I need your help." And he calls out in this mighty voice, and the enemy that he's facing off against snarls and charges to strike at him. And as he does so, I'm going to go ahead and roll another engage in combat. This is going to be 2d6 plus fierce once again, as Benn is trying to fend him off while he hopes for his fellows to join him. 6 plus 5 on the dice is an 11, plus 1 is a 12. So not only is a hit, it's a complete success. So he gets to choose one of the options here, which I think this time he's going to continue fighting defensively. So he's going to inflict 1 more harm to this enemy. And because I got a 10 plus on this, I get to pick 1 additional option. And that is you stymie your opponent. They must change their behavior somehow. You are impressive or dominant, gain the attention or respect of those present. You achieve a goal. You may change the situation, grab something from your opponent, push them somewhere, block their entrance or exit, etc. I'm going to choose that last one, which is achieve a goal. And what that is he's dealt 2 harm to this enemy, and they're facing off. They are moving into position to strike again, and I think this attacker hears boots thundering on the deck above, and he looks around and begins to run away into the bowels of the ship. Benn gives chase and manages to trip him as other members of the Crest clatter down the hold, weapons drawn. They set upon this man, and they are able to capture him before he's able to escape and before he's able to do anything else. So they pounce on him, hold him down, remove his weapon from him, and bind him. And Benn stands over him, holding his blade down at the now bound attacker, heaving with his breath. I think his hands shake a little bit as he is now feeling that adrenaline begin to leave his body, and he coughs a little bit of blood comes out. Benn shudders and then drops to his knees, and a couple of the Crest soldiers grab him and they begin worrying over him. And I think that is going to mark the end of that scene. Whew, that was close. So Benn is injured and pretty severely injured. So 4 harm does not go away easily. In fact, it is going to require some healing from an NPC who has the necessary skills. So I think it is reasonable to assume that there is a medic on the ship, or a chirurgeon, or whatever it is. So let's ask the fate chart. I think it is very likely. So I'm going to roll my percentile dice and compare it against our cast factor of 5. 11 is yes, there is. Just a regular yes, so not an exceptional yes, but there is a surgeon of some sort who is able to tend to Benn. The Crest soldiers have bound this attacker and pull him aside. They've sequestered him. And I think Benn is kind of like coming in and out of consciousness as he hears Iron Gull like come down the stairs and is like, "What happened here?" And one of the Crest soldiers is like, "We're not sure. We heard Benn cry out. We came down the stairs. We saw him fighting this fellow and he's severely wounded." And Iron Gull turns and looks around, looking for any sign of other attackers or observers. And then he looks at the man, I think pulls back the hood on the attacker. And does he recognize him? I'm going to say it is unlikely. 73. So no, he does not. So he does not recognize the man. He's like, well, he's not part of the crew here. I've never seen him before on this ship. Could we have picked him up from when we were in port? And there's some sort of talking back and forth. Then Iron Gull says, all right, everyone keep your eyes open. Let's get Benn some help. And then I'm going to have to talk to the steward and make sure that our presence here wasn't given away by someone. And he is going to disappear up the steps. I think this is where Benn is sort of like in and out of consciousness. And at that point, he blacks out. So at that point, Benn has received some healing. So I think the next scene is Benn wakes up on the ship. Chaos factor went up because there were definitely some chaotic things that happened. And let's roll our D10 and see what happens. A 9. So the scene plays out as expected. So Benn wakes up in this hammock below deck. There are 2 Crest soldiers standing watch over him. And he sort of opens his eyes very slowly and peers out into the gloom. I think he tries to like rise a little bit. He tries to struggle out of the hammock, and a firm hand reaches down and pushes him back and says, "No, stay down, Benn. You were very fortunate. The blade just barely missed your kidney, but you're hurt, and it's going to take a while before you're up and around." Benn looks up at Iron Gull, and he says, "I appreciate that, Sergeant, but I should be all right. I've suffered worse blows in my time. What of my attacker?" Iron Gull says, "He's alive, and we've questioned him, but he has been reluctant to tell us who he is or what his mission was. It seems as though he came aboard at port. There are a few sailors aboard who remember seeing him lurking around the docks while we were loading the crates. How he got onto the ship without us seeing, I'm not sure, but regardless, here we are. He's captured, and we've made a thorough search of the rest of the ship. It doesn't look like there's any other stowaways aboard. Benn looks up at him and says, "He must be connected to the Vidala. Otherwise, why would he attack me when I started to investigate those crates?" Irongull says, "I've been thinking the same thing. That's why we've been going over the crates. So far, they seem to be standard trade goods. We haven't found any hidden compartments or anything out of the ordinary, but I can't say that I'm feeling any easier about it. There's just something wrong here." Benn nods and says, "I'm happy to help in whatever way I can." Irongull says, "For now, you're going to stay here and rest." And that is going to be, I think, the end of that scene, as Benn is going to stay in bed and rest. And let's ask the fate chart some stuff. Let's find out if anything else happens on this journey. Whatever the Vidala are planning, we haven't really figured it out yet. Is there one of those artifacts on this ship? And I think it is 50-50. I think there are probably artifacts that they are trying to smuggle in, but I don't think they would have them on every single shipment. So this is really a question of whether or not the Aleko got selected to bring these artifacts back towards the city. So 50-50, we're going to go off that chaos rank of 6 from that previous scene that we just played out. See what happens. 85 is no. No, there is not an artifact aboard this ship. So I think what that means is they make their way back to Heartvale after exploring the crates, and they don't run into any trouble of a magical variety from that standpoint. However, just because they are on this journey doesn't mean, just because they're safe from the magical dangers, doesn't mean that there aren't other dangers on the open sea. So in that 2-week journey back to Heartvale, do they encounter any other dangers? I'm going to say it's probably likely that something comes up. So we're going to continue off that chaos rank of 6, and likely 35. Yes, they do come across some other danger. Does that danger relate to pirates or nature? I'm going to ask about pirates. So I think it's probably 50-50 between pirates and nature. So let's go ahead and say 50-50. Is it pirates? 85. No, it's not pirates. Okay, so they are making their way back, and this squall. So they are beginning to feel this weather churning around them. The waves are beginning to crash against the sides of the ship as the rowers are rowing hard, trying to keep the Aleko out of the path of this storm that's rolling across the sea. And at this point, I think it's been about a week and a half into the journey home. I think they're close enough that they're in sort of Heartvale patrolled waters, which is why they haven't come across any sort of pirates or any dangers on the sea like that. But this storm comes through, and I think Benn is well enough at this point. His wounds have been bound that he is able to like get up and move around the ship, but he's not recovered enough to really be useful when it comes to like helping to batten down the hatches, as it were. But our next scene is going to be, I think, survive the squall. And our chaos rank is going to, it went down because the scene of him waking up didn't really turn up any sort of chaotic elements. So let's go ahead and roll our d10, compare it against our chaos factor of 5, and see what happens. 7. So this is above the chaos factor, so our scene setup is going to play out as expected. So since Benn is not able to do much when it comes to the caretaking of the ship, I think he descends down into the hold, and he is going to go to where the man that attacked him is being held, and he is going to sit with him. And I think they are holding him in one of the sort of deep parts of the hold, and they have bound him in ropes and tied him off. There are 2 Crest soldiers who are basically on permanent guard watching him. Benn enters the room, and the man looks up at him, and there is a shadow that passes over his face when he sees Benn. And does Benn catch that? I think the answer is going to be on the fate chart. 50-50 here. 29 is a yes. Yes, he does. And I think he sits down across from the man and he says, "Hello there. It seems you were disappointed that you did not succeed in killing me. Why is that so? Were you sent to kill me in particular, or to stop me from investigating those crates?" The man looks at him and scowls and says nothing. Benn shrugs and says, "Look, we are in the midst of a storm. I don't have anywhere else to be." And the boat kind of rocks a little bit. He says, "I don't mind waiting with you, and I will continue to ask these questions as long as I have to get an answer. Now tell me, who are you and why did you try to kill me?" Is there anything that Benn knows that he could use as leverage on this guy? And I am going to roll on the fate chart. I think, again, it's 50-50. 45. 45 is a yes. So he does know something that could be used as leverage. Let's roll on action subject to see if that gives us a hint of what that might be. 48. Block. And 19. Block new ideas. Block new ideas. Okay. So Benn just starts talking, and he says, "Why are you so set on bringing these artifacts, or whatever they might be, into Heartvale? Why are your people so interested in bringing down the drift?" And I think he's watching carefully as he says these things, and the man looks away at the mention of the drift. And Benn says, so it is about the drift then. Fascinating. Tell me something. Is it their more libertine attitude that you dislike, or the fact that they are undeniably excellent sailors, or perhaps they pose a threat to the Navy? Do you work for the Admiral? And there's really, I think, no response to that. And Benn says, so the Vidala then. And he sees the man's, fists curl a little bit. Says, "What is it exactly about the drift that the Vidala hate so much? Or is there any hate there at all? Are you just using them because it's more convenient? Tell me something, please. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to keep asking questions that you're never going to answer. And really, I hate wasting my time, and you're wasting your time. What little time you have left, my friend." And I think he's going to attempt to persuade this guy to talk. So he's going to persuade with leverage. When you try to convince someone to do or say something for you by using something you have against them or offering to give them what they want, roll plus wily. So I think he has enough sort of insight into this guy to know that he's connected to the Vidala and that there is something about the drift that they are after. And I think his leverage here is that he says to him, once we return, I will have no more use for you, and you will be turned over to the drift. Now, I can't be sure, but I believe their system of government indicates that they have a voice, a vote, in punishments on those who wrong them. I wonder how many sailors aboard the Undanya have friends amongst the other drift ships. Would you care to wager a guess? And how forgiving do you think they will be to someone who works for people who tried to turn their friends into some sort of mindless, magically afflicted killing machines? Tell me, what do you think? And he is going to try to persuade with leverage here, rolling 2d6 plus 1 for Wily. Here we go. 7 on the dice, plus 1 is 8 for a mixed success. So on a 7 and 9, the MC picks 1. They want even more than what you're offering or suggesting. They want concrete proof or upfront payment of the leverage immediately before they do anything. They want something else than what you're offering or suggesting instead. I don't know. I could see it going any of those 3 ways. So I'm going to roll a d6, and 1 to 2 is going to be the first one, 3 to 4 is the second one, 1 to 2 will be the first one, 3 to 4 is the second one, 5 to 6 is the third one. 4, so that'll be the second option. They want concrete proof or upfront payment of the leverage immediately before they do anything. So I think Benn says these words, and the man looks around at the crest soldiers, notes that there aren't any drift sailors in the room with them, and he finally speaks and says, "What are you offering?" Benn says, "If you help me, I will make sure that you do not go to the drift. We will work out a different arrangement for you." The man looks at him through heavily lidded eyes and says, "And how do I know I can trust you? You are mercenaries, after all. Take payment from the highest bidders." Benn nods and says, "Yes, that is quite true. And we are, in fact, contracted to the drift. That should give you pause. However, know this. We have no interest in you. Because we're mercenaries, we understand the nature of doing business. We understand when an individual takes action because they have been paid by an employer. As such, we have no reason to seek further revenge against you. I was the wronged party. If I tell my associates that we do not need to seek vengeance on you, they will accept that. If instead you give us information about the Vidala and what they're planning, then you and I will be square. A life for a life." The man thinks about this for a moment and then says, "I can tell you some things. I don't know much. But I won't tell you until we are back in Heartvale. And you keep me out of their hands." The drift? Yes, their hands as well. But if you can make sure that I don't get found by my employers, if you can make sure that I don't die before then, I'll tell you what you want to know. Benn nods and says, "I think we have an agreement then." And he turns to the 2 crest soldiers and says, "Make sure to keep him safe." And Benn is going to get up and make his way out. Now, while all that's going on, there's a storm raging outside, and we're going to do a quick fate chart to see how the ship fares. This could go very, very awry very quickly. So the drift ship Aleko is, I think, manned by a reasonably skilled crew. The members of the drift live aboard their ships, so they care about their ships greatly. So I think it is likely that the Aleko survives the storm. And we're going to roll on our cast factor of 5. Here we go. 43 is a yes. Yes, the Aleko survives the squall and makes it through, and that is where we'll end the scene. The Aleko returns to Heartvale and makes it back about 2 weeks after it left the port where they picked up the crates. There were other ships that sailed out to pick up cargo, not all from the same ports, from multiple smaller ports along the shore to the south and a little bit to the north as well. I think the Aleko is the first one to return. The question we have to ask ourselves is, was this all a ruse because the Vidala knew that the Andanya had been purged by the crest? Was this whole delivery a ruse so that they could bring these things in a different route? I think it is unlikely, but we're going to ask the fate chart anyways. So this is going to be unlikely, chaos rank of 5. 83. No, it was not a ruse. So some of those ships out there are carrying artifacts. The other question I think we have to ask, because I think the captain is smart enough to know, the captain of the crest, that is smart enough to know that they're probably not going to send shipments on every single ship. He probably would have divided out a number of crest soldiers onto all of the different ships. But they are short on mages, so he might have had to guess, or he might have had to basically spread them out. So let's ask this question first. Did any of the ships undergo the same magical malady that the Andanya suffered? Because I think this will help us decide what happens next. So did any of those ships suffer the same magical malady? I'm going to say it's 50-50. Chaos rank of 5 once again. 80. 80 is a no. So if none of the ships suffered any of the maladies, is that because the crest was there to stop it? Or because the Vidala and whoever they're working with learned better how to maintain the guise of secrecy and keep these artifacts hidden? So I'm going to say, did the crest stop all of the artifacts from popping off and creating these magical maladies on the ships? I think it is unlikely, just because I think there's at least the possibility that one or more slipped through. So I'm going to say it's unlikely. Chaos rank of 5. 64. No, they did not. So one or more slipped through. I'm going to roll a d6. And I'm going to have it, so basically turn it into a D3. So 1 to 2 will be 1 artifact slip through, 3 to 4 will be 2 artifacts, 5 to 6 will be 3 artifacts. Rolled a 3 on the die, which means 2 artifacts slipped through. So they found some, and they stopped those, but 2 artifacts slipped through into the city. The Aleko returns to Heartvale with the crest soldiers aboard, Ben is still injured and feeling the effects of his wounds, but he walks off the ship with his head held high. They may not have found one of those evil artifacts aboard this ship, but they did find an information source. The Crest soldiers bring the captured assassin off the ship in the night. They drag him to the crow's nest, face covered so that no one might recognize him. And when they arrive, they sequester him away with those promises that Ben offered. He is going to give up information. So let's go ahead and set that scene, because I think getting some information from him is going to help set the tone of where they're headed next. I am going to increase the chaos factor to 6, because even though they returned successfully, they have not succeeded in finding all the artifacts and everything. And so I think that there is just more general chaos in this situation. The scene setup is going to be the assassin provides information, and we're going to roll our d10 to see how this setup plays out. A 9. So once again, we roll above the chaos factor, and the scene plays out as expected. They're in the crow's nest, in a back room, and there are a number of people present. There's the captain, the lieutenant, Iron Gull. The analyst Saga is also present with her large tome and quill at the ready to write down what he has to say. And Ben is present as well. And I think Ben feels very uncomfortable in this room with the leadership of the Crest when he's only been with them for about 4 months now. But the assassin made it clear that the deal that he made was with Ben, and in order to ensure that Ben's portion of the deal was upheld, that he would have to be present. So they are asking him questions as Ben is sitting in the back corner, listening and observing. And let's find out what he knows. So first of all, let's just go ahead and ask the fate chart, how much information does he have? And I think it is probably not a whole lot of information. So I'm going to say it is very unlikely that he has what I'll call big information, like very actionable intelligence. I think he'll have some details. He'll be able to flesh out some of the workings of the Vidala family, but I think it is very unlikely that he has actionable intelligence that is going to assist them right now. So chaos rank of 6. Does he have actionable intelligence that is going to assist them? Very unlikely. 69 is a no. No, he does not. Okay, so what intelligence does he have? I think let's go ahead and roll just an action and subject and see what that gives us. 26. Procrastinate. That's an interesting one. And 18. Procrastinate the intellectual, or procrastination of the intellectual. So I think he doesn't have a whole lot of information on the Vidala's goals. His job was to wait at the dock to board the ship that came into port and to kill Ben. I think this is a very important note that he says his orders were to kill that crest soldier, and he points to Benn on the other side of the room. He was given a description, not a name, but a description. And he was told that this crest soldier would be aboard the Aleko, and that when the crates were loaded on board, that he should slip onto the ship, hide, and kill that crest soldier. He doesn't know why exactly Benn was targeted, but I think what he does know is that his superior, who was one of the foremen of the Vidala family holdings, told him that that crest soldier had information that was detrimental to the family, and that if he was allowed to live, the family itself would be in danger. At which point I think the crest leadership turn and look at Benn, and Sergeant Irongull sort of gives him a very meaningful look of like, what do you know about this? And Benn just shrugs slightly and says, I don't know. I've told you all the information that I've discovered so far. I suppose there could be something else that I know or knew at some point that I just haven't connected yet, but I don't know what it would be. They look back at the assassin, and the assassin says, I don't know what it is. I only know that I was sent to kill him specifically. Irongull says, well, this makes things interesting, doesn't it? Where are the Vidala family hiding? We've had agents looking for them in the city, and we can't find where they're staying. The assassin says, I don't know. I worked out of that port. I don't know where they are here. Is there anything else you do know? Because so far, this deal has not really been worth it. He says, that is what I know. Benn says, I believe him. I don't think he has any reason to hide anything more. Likely his failure to kill me is going to result in his own death if he were to return to the family. I think we should send him on his way and see what happens. The captain grunts and says, that's one way to handle it. And then turns to Lephalia, who laughs, and her eyes flash as she turns and waves a hand over the face of the assassin, and his eyes widen as blood begins to leak out of his eyes and out of his nose and out of his ears and out of his mouth. And he opens his mouth in this wordless scream and then slumps forward. Benn, from his place in the back of the room, says, Wolf's breath. The captain turns and looks to Benn and says, you're new to the crest, so I'll understand your reluctance on this. We are only able to survive if we stand together. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And this assassin, if we let him live, eventually could be turned against us. We don't allow weapons to be turned against us twice. Understood? Benn stands and nods. The captain says, good. I'm glad to hear it. We really have nothing actionable here, but I think it is at least worth noting that our enemies are aware of who is looking into them. Iron Gull, I think you'll have to reassign your agent. We will find a different path forward. In the meantime, and he looks to Benn once again, rest up. Dismissed. Benn offers a crisp salute and leaves the room behind. We see a stone door. It's surrounded by packed earth, and there are torches on the walls leading towards this stone door. We see a figure in dark clothing walking down this hallway. And they reach the doorway, and a hand extends out and presses against the stone. The stone door slides open, and a puff of acrid, smoky air emerges out of this chamber that the door opens into. The figure crosses the threshold and makes their way into the room, where there are a half dozen other figures seated around a small basin full of fire that is emitting this acrid smoke. These other figures are not clothed. They are covered in paint with various runes and arcane scripts marked upon them. The figure comes to stand beside one of the seated figures. That seated figure pulls her gaze away from the crackling fire in that basin and looks up at the hooded figure. She says, "Have you brought all of them?" The hooded figure says, "No, I have not. Some were intercepted by those meddlesome crest. But we have 2 of the artifacts in the city, and more are coming." The old crone looks back towards the fire and says, "2 will be enough for now. Make sure the others get through. And as for those crest..." And the hooded figure says, "Don't worry, Mother. I have plans for them." Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really does help others find me. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @ErrantSoloPod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.